Hi guys, I'm Brian Godman with Staack Motorsports over here in Butte, Montana. And this is...
I'm Ryan Welch. I'm the service technician.
Okay, what are we doing today?
What are we doing? We're going to kind of go over some pre-check maintenance if you just put your machine away for the winter, just to kind of get you basic ready for the summertime. We're just going to kind of go over a few things basically on these, any type of side-by-side. Most importantly, check your battery. A lot of people kind of forget about batteries. Biggest thing is they will die after time, in 30 days to 2 months depending, or even sooner. So best thing is always check your battery. If it is dead, put it on a tender or charger, see if you can get some life to it. If not, you will probably have to replace a battery if it's sat quite a while.
Okay, what's the model we're using today?
Today we're doing a 2020 Kawasaki Teryx KRX 1000.
Ooh, the new ones.
Brand spanking new.
Yep.
This one's pretty loaded down with a lot of features. Kawasaki's come out with a lot of great accessories to go along with these machines. So some of the things you see on here is not factory, but is a great look at some of the things they've come out with. We'll go over checking oil, checking batteries, talk about fuel conditions.
Okay, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Say I'm that guy that I rode all last summer. I did wash it once,
Yep.
maybe twice, but then when winter came, I was ready to put it away. I just put it away. What would you tell me to do when I'm getting ready to put it away so that I won't have so much work in the spring to get ready to ride again?
Okay, if I was going to put it away for the year, I would definitely, I'm the guy that likes to keep things clean and nice. The cleaner ship is the happy ship. So I like to wash my machines before I put them away. I use a fuel med or some kind of a stabilizer that is fuel friendly and not going to damage fuel components or engine components.
So would I run it as low on gas as possible, or does that matter with what you're talking about?
Not necessarily. If you have the right fuel additives, it doesn't matter low or full. Yamaha uses a great product called Fuel Med, and that's what we use in all of our machines. It really helps.
Even if it's not a Yamaha?
Even if it's not a Yamaha. It's a great product that really helps keep fuel in good condition.
Okay.
Ethanol is a huge problem in small engine. It works great in our vehicles that we drive every day, but small engines that sit, especially carbureted, it separates and deteriorates in your carburetors and aluminum parts, and then causes a lot of problem when you go to get them moving again. Batteries, like Brian said earlier, they may show good voltage, but if they've sat unattended without a battery tender or things to maintain them, they may show good voltage and start your machine in the garage, and then when you get to the mountain or trail system to go ride, it's dead. Batteries don't always hold up when they sit. They can sulfate, lose charge. They'll show good voltage, like I say, but when you load test them, they fail to produce the amperage needed to crank the machine several times.
And the best maintenance for that is do like a battery tender, or every month bring the battery, leave it in the house, or you can even leave it in the machine, put the tender on it, plug it in, let it do its cycle. It'll charge, it'll desulfate them, and that always helps them. You can do that once a month. That's a great thing to keep a battery alive for a long time.
And you're talking about doing that during the season while you're riding?
Yes,
okay.
Anytime it's sitting over a period of time, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
They make leads you can just bolt to your battery, so you don't have to access the battery every time you want to plug it in. All you got to do is plug the pigtail in and you're good to go there. But I'm trying to think of what else.
Nothing special, just a 110 outlet in a garage or an extension cord from the house. Pretty simple.
Yep.
Anybody plugs their car in, lives in our area, they understand that they got to plug it in when it's cold out. Same thing with a battery. If you're letting it sit, just plug it in, let it run. And everything's safe. They have safe mechanisms. Well, they're fail safes. They will shut off if something happens or trip or break.
Okay, what if I don't live in an area that's as cold as it is here in Butte?
I'd still do it. Absolutely. It's still a preventative on it. It helps it out. It don't matter if you live in cold or non-cold. Batteries sitting there a lot of times, and some of these newer machines with the fuel injection always have a constant drain on that battery, so they will drain them.
Because heat's just as bad on a battery as cold.
Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. What else are we gonna do if to put it away? You talked about a fuel additive.
Fuel additive, batteries, keeping it clean, checking all your fluids. Make sure that everything, your engine oil is good and clean. It's not a good idea to leave dirty oil sit for a period of time. Sludge and things separate from the oil as it sits. Can cause sludge buildup to where oil doesn't flow as freely once you do get moving again. I like to walk around the machine, check out my tire conditions so that if you are sitting, tires go flat. If they sit flat, you can damage a tire, you get flat spots, things of that nature. Check your gearboxes. In this case of this machine, it has what they call a rear transaxle, where it is the transmission and the rear differential is one unit. So that being said, there is a little more importance as far as keeping it clean and full, as there's more components altogether. And as that oil gets dirty, you're damaging more than just a differential or more than just a transmission. A little more sophisticated parts. Recommend always keeping the manufacturer's brand of oil and what they recommend in these. Because they have designed the oils to meet the standards that their components need. As far as a lot of machines run their brake system in the differential, and they call that a wet brake. So being said with that, they need an extra additive in their oil to prevent damage to the brake discs in the differential. If you do put the wrong oil in, if it was just a gear oil, not a wet brake oil, it will cause noise and eventually damage, premature wear to your parts.
Absolutely. Another good thing too, living in our area, most people put it in their shed, put it in their garage. Best thing to do is periodically go check. Any place that's a little crevice, air filter, sometimes little critters get in there, build a home. Always check that, make sure they're out, because they'll chew on wires and then you'll be chasing wires. Well, I got a full battery, I've got this and that, but always check. Anywhere where there's up in the front if it's covered, anywhere there's a little spot where it's warm, they can build a nest. So always check that. That's huge.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then one of the most important maintenance items for your machine, sitting or not, is the air filter. Can't be stressed enough to check it all the time. Keep it clean. If it is a foam oil, keep it cleaned and oiled. If it's an air or a paper, keep it clean. Don't blow it out with air, blow holes in it, and then you might as well not have a filter. If you're following groups riding and it's really dusty, every day, check it every day, all the time.
So wait a minute, are you saying there's areas I could be in Butte and it wouldn't be dusty?
Good point.
Winter time.
Yeah.
Winter time in the snow.
Most people think that too. They drive their automotive all the time, but they're never in the dirt and the dust like these machines. We kind of forget about that. We jump in one of these, it feels like an automotive car, whatever truck, so we don't think about that. We jump on our trucks, drive up and down our main streets, there's no dust. With these, they live in the dust.
Yeah.
It's just as important, if not more, than your oil. I've repaired more failed engines due to dirty air filters and dirt ingestion than anything.
Okay, so I've done what you've asked me to do, or maybe I didn't do all the things that you've done when you've walked around it,
Sure.
when you're ready to put it away. If I didn't do that stuff, why don't you walk us through what we're gonna do in well, actually, what time would you do it? When would you start checking it out to get it ready to ride?
As soon as I think I'm gonna start riding, I like to get ahead of the game and try to look at my machine before I know I'm gonna go riding. Give me some time to
Give yourself at least a week. Maybe.
Exactly, to make necessary repairs if needed. Don't just jump in and go.
Right.
Make sure that things are in proper order before going to prevent damage or being stranded.
Everybody's biggest fear is being stranded.
Yep, exactly. So I would start with battery, checking my voltage. If you have been maintaining it all winter or the period of time that it's been sitting, most likely you're going to be fine. Once I know that that's okay, I'm going to go for tire pressures. Each machine has their own recommended pressures. Tires will tell you a rating, but that's not necessarily what the manufacturer recommends. Most manufacturers have a label somewhere in the cabin or the cargo area that recommends a certain tire pressure. I've noticed with a lot of machines, especially these newer ones and the more sophisticated they get, if tire pressures are off, you can obviously have pulling to one direction or the other, or it can cause vibration or gear noise through the drivetrain because of uneven pressures. It's putting an odd load to the drivetrain and cause some weird issues there.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's do the tires and then the battery.
Okay, so we'll go for the recommendation sticker for this machine is right below the driver's seat. As you can see there, they want 12 psi on the front tires and 17 in the rear. A lot of machines do that where front and rear are quite different from each other.
And so you're saying I'm not going to read what it says on the tire?
You can. Most times it's a load rating as far as, let's see if I can see it here. They say their max operating pressure is 18 psi for this tire. All tires are different due to ply ratings, what their intended use is for. Then you can get into things as far as beadlock rims. We run beadlocks so we can air our tires lower and still maintain good grip to the wheel, and they won't slip in the wheel or cause other issues as far as low tire pressure can cause. A lot of machines you'll see, this is a good tire that tells you this. Some tires don't say anything other than a max inflation to seat beads when you're mounting the tires. That's not where you want to operate them, obviously. There again, I mean, this one's pretty close to what the manufacturer recommends. Not all are. A lot of them, this tire may have been designed with Kawasaki to go just for this machine, where other machines, they're just getting a tire that's been produced for several machines, and it doesn't necessarily mean that their pressure is what the manufacturer wants. So always check that, make sure that they're even and to the proper pressures.
Okay.
And on that same basics too is always check brake pressure, fluid, check the lines. I mean, that's just a safety feature for everybody, especially if we're down in the area of the tires. You know, use your cables, make sure anything is not leaking. Cables are usually right here. Always check if you can. Sometimes you can't see like a caliper or anything, but check brake pads. Could be worn. When you put them away, you didn't notice anything, but it's sitting. Sometimes things will just start to leak. It happens, but always check lines. Check, make sure you got good pedal firm, brake pressure.
Is dust pretty hard on brake pads? And
Yes.
Mud, dust.
Muddy areas, if there's a lot of mud built up in wheels. I've noticed now machines are starting to come with, this machine has an actual scraper that is mounted on the control arm, and as the wheel comes around, it's keeping mud, snow, and other debris clear of the wheel and the brake components. That goes back to keeping things clean.
Exactly.
Mud builds up in calipers, pads can stick, things of that nature.
Let me guess, after every ride you wash yours?
Not always. I'd like to say I do, but no, it doesn't always happen.
But
no.
more often than not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And another big thing about mud too, when they get caked up around engine clutching, it creates heat. It kind of insulates everything and keeps that heat in there. So clean all that off of there. Machines breathe better. They're happier. Like when I'm clean, I'm happy. I'm dirty, I'm not so clean. I'm happy.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so after the tires, we're going to the battery?
Yeah, let's look at the battery. So this one, the battery, a lot of new side-by-sides are coming with a more automotive type battery to power all of their accessories and meet the demands of higher voltage draw. This one is obviously fairly easy to get a charger hooked up to. If you were to put a battery tender lead, you can bolt them right to these studs and have a plug routed anywhere that to your preference for easy to plug into. Always make sure your terminals are clean and tight. A lot of times I get machines come in, won't start, customer just put a new battery in, or the battery's not that old, but they're having weird issues. I've found the terminals are loose. Nothing more than that. Voltage is great, the terminals are loose, they don't make their connection. Lead contacts, I see a lot of times as you tighten them, they squish. Lead's soft, they loosen up. So check that often. You know, if you're going to look at your battery, that's a great time, first time of the season. Check the tightness of your connections. It may save you that one headache that was so simple.
So on side-by-sides, not like we're riding our truck on a paved road. A lot more vibration, a lot more jostling and stuff. So does that honestly put more, not stress, but more stress on the battery?
Absolutely.
So it could loosen quicker than like a car.
Exactly. And there again, temperature change can come into effect there as well. You know, you heat and cold. Metals, especially soft metal like lead, can expand and contract with temperature change. Definitely. I see that so much in motorsports with terminals being loose, for sure.
Okay, what else should we check? Springtime.
Definitely check coolant. I don't know if we talked about coolant. We kind of show you up here in the front. Always a good idea. You don't have to get too wild as far as there's a coolant bottle here, so your reservoir bottle here, just make sure there is coolant in there. Always a good idea to check coolant in the actual radiator. You know, make sure the vehicle is cold stone. You don't want it warm because you could have an issue of too much pressure or too much heat coming out of there. So it's always a good idea to check levels there. A lot of times Ryan will see a lot of these machines come in, there's no coolant in the the overflow bottle. Always a good idea to make sure there is something in there. Just extreme heat. These are always, driven hard, even in the colder temperatures, the hotter temperatures. It's very extreme machine, so always double check that. That's a huge thing.
Coolant and radiator condition is just as important in the wintertime as summertime, as far as keeping the engine cool and flowing efficiently. Another thing that I always see, it's mostly in rancher machines where they're used in muddy, messy conditions all the time, but also in guys that mud bog and do things like that, is your radiator fins, and they will get plugged with dirt. This one is kind of hard to see because it's pretty shrouded up. Machines will come in, they're overheating, they're full of coolant, the fan's coming on, everything's working properly, but there is so much mud and debris in the air filter that there is no room for air to flow and cool the coolant properly.
And then everybody forgets too, going back to keeping machines clean. Always make sure you can usually see that side of the radiators. For some reason you can see any type of mud in there, make sure that debris is clean. There is a fan usually behind most all these machines, so make sure that fan is moving. You can hear the fans kick on, which always helps. Sometimes when you shut your machine off or at least cycle the key back on, the fan will kick on to cool the machine.
And a lot of times it's as simple as taking a good flashlight, shining it through the grill. You should be able to see through the fins of the radiator with your light.
Correct.
Best way to clean it? If it
Water. A lot of times it's hard to do, but if you can push water backwards through it, as mud and debris is coming in this way, if you spray at it, you're not necessarily going to get it out. If you can push through from the backside, it'll clean it up. They are very light aluminum, so you can damage them pretty easily, so use caution when you're doing it.
Be careful, some of these high pressure hoses
exactly.
and stuff,
don't use a pressure washer as much as just a hose with a nozzle. You can use compressed air if you have it. Not everyone has that readily available, but that also works really well. As you're going on tires, I'm looking at brakes, and on the same line, CV boots. I see a lot of machines, especially with A-arm guards, that are there to protect the axle and brake lines and boots. Snow builds in them, snow freezes, turns into ice, mud, sticks, will cut your boot. Even just as something as small as a little hole over time going submerged in water. Water and dirt gets in these joints and it will ruin them. And as these machines get bigger and faster and need stronger joints, they get more expensive, and it gets expensive to repair these for a torn boot. If you see a torn boot, there will be grease slung out around the area. If you see that, it's time to get it repaired before it causes you more problems. So I always just look at all the boots. If you have to roll the machine forward and back to see if there is any tear or poke a hole in any sort of the bend in the boot, always get that repaired right away.
Front and rear.
Front and rear.
Everywhere you look,
Yep.
don't matter. Front shoes sometimes a little harder to see because, like Ryan was saying, there is A-arm guards. Not all the time. Rear's pretty wide open, so you can see it a little bit easier.
Exactly.
Front seem to take the most abuse as far as.
Yep. So then while we're here on this machine, engine oil for this machine is pretty simple to check. It has a really nice, easily visible sight glass. It has an upper and a lower line. Most manufacturers recommend at least between the two lines. And you can obviously see pretty well the condition of the oil, how dirty or clean it may be.
That would go for the same with like a dipstick if somebody's
Yes.
same situation.
Yes.
In
A lot of
between the lower to
machines.
to the upper.
Yep. A lot of machines have a dipstick instead of a sight glass. So the same goes for that, and always read in your owner's manual the recommended procedure for changing that. A lot of machines have a dry sump engine where they have an oil tank to keep the oil, and that's where you check the oil. And when they do that, they recommend running the machine for 10 to 15 minutes, letting it sit for 3, and then checking the oil. If you don't, you can get a wrong reading. Say it looks low, you add more than you're too full, and it's probably going to leak it out somewhere. So always read your service manual or owner's manual to find out the proper way to check it.
Okay, what else should I check in the springtime?
Air filter. On this machine, the air filter is behind the driver's seat. This one has wing nuts. You just twist. Maybe. 2 clips. And the element comes out. This element is a paper. So this is one that you wouldn't want to take your compressed air and blow at it really hard, because you can damage the paper element inside, and if you get a hole in it, it's just as bad as not having a filter. And when the dirt gets into your engine, it causes all kinds of problems as far as scoring the piston and cylinder or wearing your valve seats.
Okay, so how is there any way to knock the dust out of that? Or?
These you can, I mean, you can take them and tap them on something. I mean, don't hit it hard because you can still damage it.
Right.
And make sure no water.
Exactly, no water in these. Don't use any solvents or anything of that nature. Most machines, most manufacturers don't recommend necessarily cleaning these. They just want them replaced because you can damage them. For the most part, they're not super expensive or anything of that nature because they want you replacing them.
So if I have normal wear and tear on my machine, how often would you recommend I change that?
It depends. I recommend checking it almost every ride. If not, every other ride, depending on the conditions. If you're riding in desert conditions where it's super dusty, I would check it every ride, absolutely. Conditions in the winter time, obviously you're not as dusty, so you don't have to get as crazy about checking it every time, but maybe every few rides, because you would be surprised at what debris is still in the air and will pull through these.
What if I'm the guy always in the lead though?
Doesn't matter, check it anyway. These machines, I mean, even as you sit in them, dust swirls, It builds on everything, even if you're the lead guy.
The biggest thing is, a lot of these vents or these machines, there's vents up here, there's vents here. This tire's constantly spinning, it's constantly making dust. A lot of times people think of a vehicle where the engine's up front. So if you are behind somebody, you think that dust is coming in. For the most part, it's still coming in no matter if you're leading or following somebody.
Yep, absolutely. A lot of machines are a foam filter that needs oiled. In that case, they're cleanable. Many brands sell cleaner and oil. I don't ever recommend using gasoline or solvent or things like that to clean your filters, because it can damage the foam, and then there again you're ruining your filter. I always try to recommend using either the manufacturer's brand of chemicals to clean it, or something like a Motor-X or some different brand that has an actual air filter cleaner and oil. They're usually an aerosol can. Spray the cleaner on, let it sit for a few minutes, wash it out in hot water. Make sure it's good and dry, and then there will be two types of oil, either an aerosol spray on oil, give it a good thorough coat, or it'll be a liquid that you pour on and scrunch it up and make sure that it has a really good tacky, sticky feel to it.
Because it's foam, does it absorb that oil in? Is that why you're scrunching it up?
Yep. And it will distribute it throughout the whole filter and get good coverage. And that oil's purpose is to catch the dirt and the particulates and keep them from passing through the filter to your engine.
And it's always good to bring back to Ryan's point, is to have a spare. Have that one all ready to go, have it in a Ziploc bag ready to go, because sometimes you're riding on a Sunday, some of your power sports aren't open, so it's always good to have that one. There's no sense of taking a risk, taking your machine out and say, oh, I'll get it next week.
Absolutely. Yep, you can't slack on this enough. A lot of machines, this not necessarily, because it has a nice rubber soft seal, foam element filters that you do oil, a light coat of grease around the filter's face where it seals into the air box is very important to keep things from passing through that joint where it's sealed to the air box. So that's always a good tip to use. And then being sure that when you insert the filter into the machine, that it is in correctly and mounted correctly. I see a lot of times people are changing or cleaning their filters and doing the right thing there, but we'll be honest, a lot of manufacturers, they're not necessarily the easiest to see what you're doing, and they're doing all the right things except for when they put it back in, it's not correctly installed, and then there again, dirt can pass through. So always don't get in a rush. Take the time to make sure you got it right.
But I want to go riding as quick as I possibly can.
Exactly. So that comes down to giving yourself time to look at it.
Exactly.
Get ahead of the game a little bit, because when you get in a rush, that's when things happen that end up costing money or a walk home.
Yes. Back to the stranded. Yes.
So a lot of times I can even take a flashlight and shine down in to make sure I see what the filter has to do. In this case, it has a tube that's going to sit inside here, so you just want to make sure that you sit right in on top of it, and you can almost feel it go into place. Make sure that the ring on your airbox lid is in good condition, no tears, and that it's actually seated. And this will save you a lot of trouble and money in the long run.
So anything else when we're talking about air movement?
The biggest thing is any of these machines, every vehicle has a vent on the outside that'll capture the atmospheric air coming in. So most of your machines, like we talked about, some will be up in here, some will be in the middle of the machine, or on this one, it'll be here. So my biggest concern is if there is mud covering this, we're going to have issues. So always make sure that both of these are clean. In this case, this one's for the intake, and then you have another one for the CVT. So make sure these are both clear of debris, mud, anything. If this is tore, make sure you get a new, depending on what screen type is on there. So always make sure that these are in factory looking conditions, because if these are tore, it'll be big enough where something big will get in there, or more mud or more dirt can get in there.
Okay, so is there any reason to take this off to check inside?
As long as it's in,
it's the cover.
Yeah, as long as it's not tore anywhere, any tears anywhere in here. If there's a screw loose or something, there's something. But if it looks factory condition, I would say you'd probably be just fine. There is some aftermarket ones that'll do a little bigger screen across there. But for the most part, Ryan, what do you think? As long as it's in looking, you can tell by the naked eye. As long as there's no tears in it.
Yep. If it looks like it's tore and something possibly could have gotten in there, absolutely look in and make sure there's nothing that can get pulled through. And along those lines, I mean, as much as it is engine protection, it is also performance.
Right, correct.
These filters get plugged, the engine can't breathe, it's going to rob horsepower and make it not perform as well.
Okay, what else?
Differentials, gearboxes, always check the fluid and the conditions of the fluid. Let's see how this one is. So on this machine, there again, Kawasaki does a really good job of a really nice big check hole. So it's really easy to see your fluid. You remove the cap. Most manufacturers, they have a spec that you're gonna see the fluid right at the opening. When you pull the bolt, the fluid should be right there. I use things like a zip tie or something to just dip in the oil so you can see the oil and see if it's dirty. You're obviously going to see if it's full or not, but the condition of it as well. If it's dirty, change it. It will prevent wear and tear on the differentials, because as these machines get bigger and more horsepower, there's a lot of strain on the components, and keeping clean oil in them and keeping it clean and full will prevent wear. And there again, that goes back to the proper oil as well.
And another, just a point for everyone, 90% of these machines nowadays are belt driven. Most your manufacturers nowadays make it pretty simple for you to pull the cover off just to check a belt. That's what's nice about it. That would be another big thing I could stress. You know, we always tell everybody when they buy these, well, I'll buy a spare belt. Well, maybe try to change it in your garage first before you get out on the trail and tear it all apart, and then we've got major issues. So if you can do it in your garage, great, do it, but always check your belt. A lot of times you can even see threads coming out, or if the belt looks like it doesn't look normal, if you need to take a Google picture of a belt, Google it to see what it looks like. If there's any tear, make sure, if you can't, do it yourself, bring it to the dealer, have them fix it, because I mean, that is the lifeline of these machines. You're not going to be going anywhere with a bad belt.
Absolutely. And on the CVT and belt drive topic, low range when you're loading machines, or on a trail that's really rocky and you need to go slow, put it in low range, because I see that all the time as well. Guys will load a machine in high range, crawling up onto a trailer, and they will flat spot the belt. And then as you take off, you can feel the machine lurch, and that is actually belt damage from slipping the belt. And on top of it, it's much easier on all the drivetrain components in low range when you're moving slow over obstacles.
And going back to Ryan's point, we can't stress enough about that. Everybody should read their owner's manual. It always says in there, it'll give you a certain speed to put in higher range. If you're in high range, a certain speed to put into low range. It'll protect, it'll last, save the belt life. So always read your owner's manual. They spend a lot of time making those, people sometimes just throw it in their drawer or whatever, but please read it. They are very helpful. But
we're guides. We don't ever look at the instructions when we're building anything.
I understand totally. I'm probably the same way, but once in a while, if you're sitting watching TV or doing something, just open it up, just take a quick look. Not saying you have to read it from page to page, just take a peek at it.
Yep. Understand how things work.
Right.
And there it goes back to cleanliness. As CVT systems spin, they produce a lot of heat. Under the wear and tear of a machine, the weight of the machine, the conditions you're driving in, these things get hot. They will build dust just like your air filter. They're pulling in air to keep them cool. They're going to get dirt. Keeping them clean will keep them from wearing out. There are bushings and different things in there that if they get dirt, they can damage and wear easily. So there again, keeping it clean is going to make it live longer. It's gonna help it drastically. Okay, so on most manufacturers, the covers are bolted with several bolts all the way around. Some machines will have clips that you just push off with your thumbs. There isn't a better or worse design between the two as far as I can see. Usually if they're clip style, they have a bigger seal to keep dust out than if they're bolted. That's really the only difference. A lot of guys really like the clip style because it makes it way easier to get to.
And you see that more on probably higher horse machines.
Exactly, that are designed to have them looked at more often.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so I need to take some tools with me if I'm going out.
Well, yes, and a lot of times, for a lot of manufacturers, you're not going to be able to change it on the trail. So that is why it's so important to check it before you go.
There are certain machines where you can't get
Absolutely.
to, even though you might have spent the time in your garage to do it. Some, like Ryan said, you just can't do it.
Yep. Require a special tool or a lot more time to tear it down than
So apparently you don't ride alone.
Never ride alone.
Never
I
ride
don't
alone.
ever recommend that at all.
Absolutely
Because you
not.
never know what can happen.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, what else?
Suspension, I always give them a good visual check.
Okay.
Check that oil hasn't been leaking out of seal heads and shock shafts. Make sure that everything's in good condition. You don't see a broken spring or retainers are all in place. You don't see any damage to the reservoirs, anything of that nature. Adjustment knobs, not all machines have them, but some do. Make sure they're not broken or damaged. Check bolts everywhere. Make sure that you're not missing anything. Proper tightness. It doesn't take anything to just look.
And for the
As
guy,
I'm doing other things, I'm always looking.
And for the guy that doesn't have as keen an eye as Ryan that can see that stuff, a lot of times you can even look at the machine, and if one side's sagging a little bit, you might have a suspension issue or something is loose.
Yep. Look at lug nuts. As you're doing your tire pressure, you can check lug nuts, make sure nothing's damaged or missing there. It would surprise you the things you can find just by a visual inspection.
Absolutely.
What else could we talk about?
I guess another safety feature too, Ryan, with these machines, I mean, their whole livelihood are the roll cages. Always
Absolutely.
check bolts.
Yep.
Sometimes, we talked about the vibration, the rattle, and things will come loose. So it's always a good idea. I mean, this will save your life. Seatbelts, and make sure your seatbelts are adjusted properly. But more importantly, they all have the 4 points for the roll cage. So always check bolts.
Absolutely. Okay, so service intervals on these machines, every manufacturer has their own recommendations as far as when to do what. When we sell machines, I always recommend the first service done at 100 miles or thereabouts, and I always recommend...
Which would include what, that first service?
The first service is generally, we look at everything to make sure that there's no issues or anything that's not performing the way it should. We change engine oil and filter, check the air filter, check your differentials if for some reason they're dirty at that point, because gears and components inside gearboxes will wear in to an extent, and they're going to make a little metal, so it's a good idea to get that out so that it's not getting into bearings and bushings and things that it will damage. I check the axles, the brakes, steering, shifting, everything to make sure that as the machine is being broke in, it's operating correctly and doing what it's supposed to. Then after that, I recommend every 500 to 600 miles. That seems to fit in with just about every manufacturer's recommendations to a certain standard. A lot of people follow the manufacturer's service intervals to a T, and that is always, of course, a great thing. Other people, if you're not going to get that crazy about it, staying on a 500 to 600 mile service interval is a great idea. If you can bring it to your dealer, that's great, because then if there is any issue that could be a warranty issue, they can get it taken care of for you. If you're good at doing it yourself, that's fine too. Just be sure that you stay within a good interval to keep things serviced and maintained to the proper level.